60 feet long, teeth the size of your hand, jaws wide enough to swallow a car whole. For 20 million years it ruled every ocean on Earth, and then it simply vanished. Tonight, let the mystery of the Megalodon carry you into the deep, as we drift back to a world before memory, before history, before us. If the ancient deep calls to you, if history, mystery, and the quiet wonders of our world help you find rest, then settle in and consider subscribing. New calm histories drift in every week, made for minds that never quite stop wondering. Close your eyes. Not yet to sleep. Not quite yet. First, let your mind travel. Let it move the way water moves, slowly, without effort, following the path of least resistance, spreading itself outward until it finds its level. You don't need to do anything right now. You don't need to hold on to the day that just passed or reach forward into the one that hasn't come yet. All you need to do is drift, just drift, and let the story carry you. We are going back, far back, further than history books reach, further than the oldest human story ever told, further than the first campfire, the first painted cave wall, the first word spoken aloud into the dark. We are going back to a time before any of that, the time when the earth was already ancient, but the world looked nothing like the one you know, a time when the oceans held their breath differently, when the wind moved across water that no human eye had ever seen, when the planet was alive in a way so deep and so complete that the word alive almost isn't large enough to contain it. 23 million years ago. Say that number to yourself quietly. 23 million years. Let it settle. It doesn't need to be understood. Some numbers are too large for understanding. They are only for feeling, for the particular kind of smallness that comes over you when you stand at the edge of the sea at night, or lie on your back in a field and look up at stars that are already dead. That feeling is not a frightening one, not really. It is more like relief, like being reminded that the world is so enormous, so ancient, so unhurried in its unfolding, that whatever you are carrying tonight, whatever weight has followed you to this pillow, is very, very small by comparison. Small enough perhaps to set down for a while. 23 million years ago, the Earth existed in what geologists call the early Miocene epoch. The continents were not quite where they are now. They were still moving, as they always have been, as they always will be, grinding against each other with a slowness that makes even geological time seem rushed. North and South America had not yet joined. The gap between them was open water, and through that gap the great ocean currents moved freely, carrying warmth from the tropics in long, slow rivers of heat that spread themselves across the planet's seas. The world was warmer then, not violently, not catastrophically, just warmer, the way a room feels when the sun has been on it all afternoon. The polar ice caps were smaller. Some scientists believe the Arctic Ocean may have been entirely free of ice during the warmer seasons, a thought so strange and so enormous that it belongs exactly here, in this quiet space between waking and sleep, where strange and enormous thoughts are welcome. The coastlines were different. If you could have stood on the shore of what would one day become North America and looked out at the water, you would not have recognized it. The land behind you would have been unrecognizable too. Covered in forests that no longer exist, populated by creatures that have no names except the Latin ones. Scientists gave them millions of years later when they pulled their bones from the rock and tried to make sense of what they held. There were no cities, no roads, no lights on the horizon at night, just the shore and the sound of the water, and above you a sky so dark and so full of stars that it would have seemed like something imagined, rather than something real. But we are not going to stand on the shore tonight. We are going into the water, slowly, the way you lower yourself into a warm bath at the end of a long day. There is no urgency here, no rush. The water receives you the way water always does, without judgment, without condition, closing around you gently as you descend. Feel the temperature first. It is warmer than you might expect. The surface layer is sun-warmed and clear, a pale blue-green that holds the light like colored glass. You can see for a long way in every direction. The visibility is extraordinary. The water so clean and so undisturbed by industry or pollution that it seems less like water and more like air. Like a second atmosphere, a blue one, layered beneath the one you're used to. You go deeper, the light changes as you descend. This is one of the oldest and most beautiful things the ocean does. Near the surface, the water is lit in long columns of gold and silver, shifting and shimmering as the surface above you moves. Deeper down, the light begins to lose its warmth. The gold drains out of it first, and then the red, and then the orange and yellow, until what remains is a pure, clean blue, a color that exists nowhere else on Earth, or perhaps everywhere on Earth, but is only visible from here. From this depth, in this silence, it is the color of the deep sea, and there is no color quite like it. Looking into it is like looking at something that exists just at the edge of what the human mind can hold. The world here is not empty. This is important to understand. It's easy to think of the ancient ocean as a place of absence, a world defined by what it lacks. No humans, no civilization, no history, as we understand it. But absence is not the right word. The right word is fullness. This ocean is absolutely overwhelmingly full. Life here is not something that happens at the margins, in the shallows, close to shore. Life here is everywhere. It fills every layer of the water column. It crowds the surface and carpets the seafloor and inhabits every depth in between. There are creatures here that have no name yet, creatures that will eventually leave their bones in limestone and shale for scientists to find and wonder over. Creatures going about the ancient business of eating, and being eaten with a kind of perfect, unconscious efficiency that makes the whole ocean feel like a single breathing organism. The fish move in schools so large they block the light. You have seen schools of fish before, perhaps in an aquarium, perhaps in a nature documentary, but nothing quite like this. These are not dozens or hundreds. They are millions, moving together as if directed by a single thought, turning in unison, catching the blue light on a million silver sides, creating a living, shifting curtain that ripples and flows in ways that seem almost impossible for anything made of individual creatures. The sight of it would make you stop, would make you hold whatever breath you had left and simply watch. Below the fish, deeper still, the water cools. This is where the thermocline begins, that invisible boundary where the sun-warmed surface water meets the cold water rising from the depths, a meeting place of temperatures that creates its own kind of weather, its own currents, its own communities of life. Creatures congregate along the thermocline the way animals on land congregate along the edges of rivers. It is a boundary, and boundaries in nature are always where the interesting things happen. The ocean floor here, in the warm, shallow seas of the early Miocene, is a landscape as varied and as detailed as any on land. There are mountains down here, ancient volcanic ridges rising thousands of feet from the seafloor. There are valleys and plains, vast flat expanses of soft sediment, where creatures burrow and sift and filter the endless slow rain of organic material drifting down from the water above. There are forests of coral, not quite like the ones you might picture. The corals of this period are different in shape and form, some of them enormous, some delicate as lace, all of them alive in the slow particular way that coral is alive, which is to say completely and continuously, and without anything you could recognize as effort. The seagrass meadows stretch for miles in the shallows. They move in the current like fields of wheat in a slow wind, pale green and swaying, full of small creatures that pick their way through the blades looking for food. The meadows exist close to shore, where the light still reaches the bottom, and they are among the most productive ecosystems in this ancient world. Nurseries for fish, feeding grounds for the larger creatures that patrol the edges, places of such concentrated life that even moving slowly through them you would feel surrounded on all sides by the hum and flutter and dart of living things. Go further out, away from shore into the open ocean. Here the water deepens quickly. The seafloor drops away beneath you, falling into a darkness so complete that it might as well be outer space, and in a sense it is. The deep ocean is one of the last unexplored environments on Earth even now, in the world you know. 23 million years in the future, in this ancient time, it is utterly, absolutely unknown to any conscious mind, unwitnessed by any eye that could later form words about what it saw. The deep ocean of the Miocene is perhaps the most perfectly private place that has ever existed. What happened down there in those dark miles of cold water happened without any witness at all. It happened and was done, and left no record except the slow accumulation of sediment on the seafloor, the patient layering of time. But we are not in the deep yet. We are in the middle ocean, the mesopelagic zone, where the light fades but has not yet gone entirely, where the temperature is cool but not cold, where the creatures are unlike anything in the shallower water above. This is a world of bioluminescence. In the darkness of the middle ocean, life makes its own light. Small creatures carry lanterns of cold blue-green fire in their bodies. They use it to attract prey, to signal mates, to confuse predators. The effect, if you could see it, would be like floating through a slow meteor shower. Brief flashes of light in the dark, here and gone, marking the presence of lives you will never fully see. The water moves around you in currents you can feel, but not see. The Miocene Ocean is a world of movement. Not the frantic, churning movement of a storm, but the slow, purposeful movement of a planet managing its own temperature, redistributing heat from the equator toward the poles, through enormous rivers of water that flow within the ocean like rivers within a continent. These are the gyres, the great circular currents that dominate the open ocean, and in this period they move differently than they do in your time because the geography that shapes them is different, because the gap between the Americas is still open, because the world is arranged just slightly differently, and that slight difference changes everything. You float in this current without resistance. You don't need to swim. The ocean carries you. This is the woe, ruled before the world you know. This is the ocean in its fullness, before it was mapped or named or divided up into territories, before any human stood on a ship and looked out at it and felt the particular human combination of wonder and fear and desire to cross it. This ocean has never been crossed by anything with a name for crossing. It simply exists, as it has existed for millions of years before this moment and will continue to exist for millions of years after, indifferent to the concept of indifference, alive beyond the limits of what alive usually means. And somewhere in it, in this vast and ancient and breathing world of blue and green and dark and light, something enormous moves. You cannot see it yet, but it is there. It has always been there. And tonight, in the quiet space between your last thought and your first dream, you are going to drift toward it. Slowly, safely, carried by the current of this old and patient sea, and learn the story of the greatest predator this ocean has ever known. But for now, simply float. The water is warm, the light is blue, the current is gentle. You are safe, and the ancient ocean holds you. Imagine finding something on a beach. You are walking slowly, the way people walk on beaches when they have nowhere to be. Head down, eyes soft, letting the wet sand receive your footprints and then erase them as if you were never there. The water comes and goes beside you. The sound of it is the oldest sound on earth, older than birdsong, older than wind in trees, older than anything that has ever been called music. You are not looking for anything in particular. You are simply walking, and the beach is simply there, and the ocean beside you is doing what it has always done, which is to move and breathe and offer things to the shore and then take them back again, and then you see it. Half buried in the wet sand, dark and heavy, its edges sharp enough to catch the light. You might walk past it at first. It doesn't look like much from a distance, just another piece of something the sea has left behind. But something makes you stop. Something makes you crouch down and brush the sand away with your fingers, and when you lift it and hold it in your palm, you feel the weight of it immediately. It is heavier than you expected. heavier than something this size has any right to be. It fills your hand completely, its base broad and flat, its body tapering to a point, its edges lined with tiny serrations so precise and so regular that they seem less like something grown and more like something engineered. You are holding a megalodon tooth. You are holding a letter written 60 million years ago, or 5 million, or 15 million, depending on where you found it and how deep it was buried, and what the seafloor looked like when this tooth first came to rest there. You are holding the primary evidence for one of the most extraordinary animals that has ever existed on this planet. You are holding, in the cup of your hand, almost everything we know, because here is the strange and beautiful, and quietly heartbreaking truth about the Megalodon. It is one of the largest, most powerful, most dominant creatures in the entire history of life on Earth. And it left almost nothing behind. 20 million years of living in every ocean on the planet. And what remains is teeth. Teeth and occasional vertebrae, and even those are rare enough that a single well-preserved vertebral column makes headlines in the paleontological world. The body, that enormous muscled, perfectly engineered body, is simply gone, dissolved back into the sea that made it, returned to the water without leaving a record. This is because the Megalodon, like all sharks, was built not from bone but from cartilage. Cartilage is the material your ears are made from, the tip of your nose. It is softer than bone, more flexible, lighter, and this lightness was part of what made sharks such extraordinary swimmers. A skeleton made entirely of cartilage is a skeleton that bends rather than breaks, that flexes with the body rather than constraining it, that adds almost nothing to the animal's weight while still providing structure and support. It was an evolutionary solution so elegant and so effective that sharks have been using it for over 400 million years without significant revision. Long before there were dinosaurs, long before there were trees, there were sharks, and they were already built the way they are built now, because the design was already perfect. But cartilage does not fossilize easily under the right conditions, very specific conditions involving rapid burial, mineral-rich sediment, and the absence of the bacteria that would normally break organic material down. Cartilage can preserve, but those conditions are rare. And the ocean is enormous, and most of the time when a megalodon died, it sank slowly into water that was not interested in preserving it. The body softened. The cartilage dissolved. The enormous carcass was consumed by the deep-sea scavengers that have always made their living this way, picking clean the bodies of giants until nothing remained, except the teeth. Teeth are different. Teeth, even in sharks, are dense with minerals, primarily hydroxyapatite, the same calcium phosphate mineral that makes human bone hard, but concentrated in shark teeth to a degree that makes them extraordinarily durable. A shark's tooth is, in a sense, more mineral than it is organic. It is built to last, and so when a megalodon shed a tooth, which it did constantly, the way all sharks do, cycling through thousands of teeth across a lifetime, the old ones falling forward and out as new rows moved up behind them, that tooth drifted down through the water column and settled into the sediment of the seafloor. And the seafloor slowly, patiently, over thousands and then millions of years, did what seafloors do. It buried the tooth. It pressed in around it. It gradually replaced the remaining organic material with minerals, molecule by molecule, in the slow chemical process called permineralization, until the tooth was no longer quite a tooth in the biological sense, but a perfect mineral replica of one, a fossil, preserving in exquisite detail every curve and serration of the original. And there it would wait. For millions of years it would simply wait, while continents moved, while ice ages came and went, while the ocean rearranged itself around new coastlines and new currents, while life on the surface of the planet changed beyond recognition, while the first hominids appeared, while the first humans stood upright and looked around at a world they would eventually name, while civilizations rose and fell and rose again, while everything that we think of as history accumulated itself in its thin and fragile layer at the very top of time. The tooth waited in the dark of the seafloor, patient beyond any concept of patience, still and silent and perfectly preserved, until erosion brought it back. This is the other thing the ocean does. Alongside burying and preserving, it erodes. It undercuts cliffs and crumbles headlands and sifts through ancient seabed sediments, and gradually, over time, returns what was buried to the surface. Megalodon teeth emerge from riverbanks in South Carolina, from chalk cliffs in England, from desert formations in Peru that were once seafloor, from the phosphate-rich beds of Morocco, from creek beds in Maryland where children wade in the summer looking for just this thing, looking for the dark triangles that the water keeps offering up like gifts from an unimaginably deep past. They have been found on every continent on Earth, every single one, Antarctica included. This fact alone tells you something profound about the world the Megalodon inhabited. These teeth are not clustered in one region, not concentrated in one ancient sea. They are distributed across the entire planet, scattered across every ocean basin, found in tropical shallows and temperate coastlines and cold subpolar waters. The Megalodon was not a creature of one place, it was a creature of everywhere. It owned the global ocean in a way that no other predator before or since has managed to replicate. The teeth themselves vary. This is one of the things that makes them so endlessly fascinating to the scientists who study them. They are not all identical. They range in size from small, almost delicate triangles a couple of inches long to the truly enormous specimens that stop your breath when you hold them. Teeth measuring 7.5, even approaching 8 inches along the slant height, a measurement that paleontologists call the OAL, the oblique apical length, which sounds clinical and precise, until you hold one of those 8-inch teeth in your hands and realize that this measurement represents the distance from the base of a tooth that was sitting in the jaw of something the size of a bus. The largest known megalodon teeth are genuinely difficult to hold in one hand, not because they are oddly shaped, but simply because they are so large. A human palm spread wide can barely contain them. The serrations along their edges, those tiny, regular, almost decorative-looking ridges, are themselves large enough to see individually. Each one a miniature blade, the whole edge of the tooth functioning as a saw of extraordinary efficiency. When scientists study the wear patterns on fossil megalodon teeth, when they look at the micro-scratches and the stress fractures and the patterns of damage and repair, they are reading a biography. They are finding out what this particular animal ate, how it attacked, how it used its jaws, how hard it bit, and in what direction and against what kind of resistance. The teeth are, in other words, a kind of text, and we are still learning to read them. Think about what it means to know something only through its fragments. This is not as unusual as it might seem. We know the ancient world almost entirely through fragments, through potsherds and foundation stones, through carbonized seeds and the stains of wooden posts long rotted away, through the faded ink of manuscripts and the faint marks of plows on aerial photographs. We reconstruct entire civilizations from what they left in the ground, and we do so with a confidence that is partly earned and partly a kind of necessary imagination, a willingness to look at a fragment and see the whole it came from. Paleontology works the same way, but the fragments are older, and the holes they point to are stranger and more remote. A megalodon tooth is a fragment in exactly this sense, a single remaining piece of an animal so thoroughly erased by time that everything else about it must be inferred, calculated, estimated, argued over in academic papers and conference presentations, and the particular heated quiet of scientists who care deeply about getting it right. The body size, for example, is inferred from the teeth. There is no complete megalodon skeleton. There is not even a nearly complete one. What exists are isolated vertebrae, scattered teeth, and the occasional jaw reconstruction assembled from multiple individuals. because no single fossil site has ever yielded enough material to reconstruct a jaw from one animal. When you see images of Megalodon jaws in museums, when you see those famous photographs of multiple people standing inside the reconstructed mouth, you are seeing an educated assemblage, a best estimate made from many different teeth arranged according to the known proportions of living shark jaws. The reconstruction is good science, but it is also, inescapably, a kind of storytelling. And the story it tells is extraordinary. From the size of the teeth, paleontologists estimate the body length. Different methodologies produce slightly different numbers, and the debate about exactly how large the megalodon grew is one of the genuinely contested questions in the field. Not because scientists disagree about the fundamental evidence, but because the method of extrapolating body size from tooth size involves assumptions that reasonable scientists can reasonably dispute. The most widely cited estimates place adult Megalodon at somewhere between 40 and 65 feet in length, with body weights estimated in the range of 50 to 100 tons. These are numbers that require a moment of quiet consideration. 65 feet, 100 tons. The largest great white sharks alive today reach perhaps 20 feet and weigh perhaps 2.5 tons. The Megalodon, by these estimates, was not simply a large great white. It was a great white scaled up by a factor so large that the comparison almost stops being useful. The two animals are related in the way that all life is related, but comparing them is a little like comparing a house cat to a lion, and even that analogy undersells the difference. Everything about the Megalodon was larger in proportion. The jaw was larger, obviously, but so were the muscles that drove it. Bite force estimates based on jaw dimensions and muscle attachment points suggest that the Megalodon may have had the most powerful bite of any animal that has ever lived. Significantly stronger than the T-Rex, stronger than any crocodile, stronger than anything we have direct evidence for anywhere in the fossil record. Some estimates place the bite force at upward of 40,000 pounds per square inch. The number is so large it loses meaning. What it means, in practical terms, is that the Megalodon could bite through the ribcage of a large whale without slowing down. We know this because of the bones, fossil whale bones, ancient sperm whales, ancient baleen whales. Creatures already large by any standard you might apply have been found with Megalodon bite marks in them. These are not ambiguous marks. They are deep, parallel gouges in the bone itself. Gouges whose dimensions match Megalodon teeth with the kind of precision that leaves little room for alternative interpretation. The whale was bitten by the shark. The whale died, the bones sank to the seafloor and were preserved. And millions of years later, a paleontologist held a fossil whale rib in their hands and traced the grooves in it with their finger and understood what they were looking at. This is what it means to read the fossil record. Not just the teeth themselves, but the marks the teeth left on the world. Every bite mark is a letter. Every fossil bone with parallel gouges in it is a sentence. The story they collectively tell is one of absolute dominance, of an animal so large, so powerful, so perfectly constructed for what it did, that for 20 million years it had no serious competitor in any ocean on Earth. And then it was gone. The teeth keep being found. Last year, and the year before, and every year before, that as far back as the history of fossil collecting goes, Megalodon teeth were pulled from riverbeds and beaches and ocean dredges and phosphate mines. They are still being found right now, somewhere on Earth by someone crouching in shallow water or splitting open a nodule of rock or sifting through the spoil of a commercial dredging operation. They are still being found because they were made in such enormous numbers. A single Megalodon could produce 40,000 teeth in a lifetime, shedding and replacing them continuously. And because the oceans where it lived were so vast and its range was so complete, that the teeth are genuinely everywhere, buried in the sediments of every sea. Each one is a fragment. Each one is a letter and a message written in a language we are still, slowly, learning to read. Each one is a small cold weight in the palm of your hand. Each one is a small cold weight in the palm of your hand. connecting you across an almost incomprehensible distance to something that lived and hunted and died in an ocean that no longer exists, in a world so remote from yours that it might as well be another planet. And yet here is the tooth. Here, solid and real, and faintly warm now from your hand's heat. Here is the proof that it was real, that the ocean was once larger in its life, once wilder in its fullness, once home to something so immense and so complete, that even its teeth were enough to outlast 20 million years of time. You close your fingers around it. You hold the letter, and somewhere in the blue dark below you, the ancient ocean breathes. There is a particular kind of silence that exists just before something enormous happens. You have felt it, perhaps without having words for it. The stillness before a summer storm breaks, when the air pressure drops and the birds stop singing, and the leaves on the trees go motionless, all at once, as if the world itself has drawn a breath and is holding it. The quiet that falls in a forest when something large is moving through it, just beyond your line of sight. The hush that descends on a room when everyone in it senses, simultaneously and without being told, that something is about to change. It is not an absence of sound exactly. It is something denser than that. It is key world pausing, paying attention, recognizing, in whatever way world's recognizing things, that what is about to happen matters. The ancient ocean had that silence too. It existed in the moment before the Megalodon struck. Not always, not in every hunt, not in every encounter between predator and prey in those vast, warm Miocene seas, but in the particular kind of hunt that the Megalodon was built for, the slow and patient and utterly inevitable kind. There was a silence that preceded everything. A stillness in the water, a change in pressure so subtle that only the animals closest to it could detect it. And by the time they detected it, it was already far too late. This is the thing about the Megalodon that is easy to get wrong and worth getting right. When we imagine large predators, we tend to imagine speed. We picture the cheetah's sprint, the falcon's stoop, the sudden explosive violence of a crocodile lunging from a riverbank. We associate predation with urgency, with the frantic energy of pursuit, with the kind of motion that leaves a mark on the air. And there are predators like this in the ocean too. The blue shark, built for speed. The mako, which is among the fastest fish in any sea. Even the great white, which in its final approach can move with startling swiftness. But the Megalodon was not primarily a fast predator. It could not afford to be. Consider the physics of moving something that large through water. At full size, 50, 60 feet, weighing tens of tons, the Megalodon required an extraordinary amount of energy simply to exist, to maintain its body temperature, to keep those muscles oxygenated and working, to power the constant movement that all sharks require, because they cannot stop swimming without sinking. The caloric demands of an animal this size were staggering, and the way to meet those demands was not through frantic high-speed chase that burned enormous energy for uncertain reward. The way to meet them was through patience, through strategy, through the slow, conserving, inevitable approach of a predator that does not need to hurry because it has already, in every meaningful sense, won. The Megalodon was an ambush predator, a patience predator, an animal that understood, not consciously, not with anything we would recognize as thought, but in the deep wordless way that evolution writes its knowledge into bodies, that the most efficient kill is the one that costs the least. So picture it moving through the middle ocean, in the warm blue water of the early Miocene, on a day that has no date because no one is counting the days yet. It is not hurrying. It is never hurrying. Its tail moves in long, slow sweeps, not the frantic side-to-side sculling of a panicked fish, but a deep, rhythmic, almost meditative oscillation that translates into forward movement with an efficiency that would seem lazy if you didn't understand what was happening. Each sweep of that tail, each slow cycle, is moving 60 tons through the water with less effort than it takes most animals to breathe. Its eyes are open, as shark eyes always are. They are large and dark and set wide on either side of that enormous head, giving it a field of vision that covers almost everything, except a narrow band directly in front of its snout and another directly behind. But vision is only one of the senses at work here. And in the middle ocean, with its varying visibility and its shifting light, it is not even the primary one. The Megalodon perceives its world through water, through the lateral line, that remarkable sensory system that runs along the sides of all sharks, a series of fluid-filled canals connecting to the water outside their small pores, detecting pressure changes and vibrations in the water with a sensitivity that is most beyond imagining. A struggling animal in the water creates pressure waves, a whale moving at the surface, a school of fish changing direction, a sea turtle swimming in its slow and ancient way toward a feeding ground. All of these create disturbances in the water, tiny variations in pressure that radiate outward in all directions. And the Megalodon reads these disturbances the way you might read text on a page. And then there is the ampullae of Lorenzini. These are the small, jelly-filled pores clustered around the snout of all sharks, each one connected to a sensory cell that detects electrical fields. Every living creature generates an electrical field, the simple electrical activity of a beating heart, of muscles contracting, of a nervous system firing its quiet signals along its network of fibers. In open water, this electrical field is vanishingly small, detectable only at very close range. But the ampullae of Lorenzini are sensitive enough to detect it. They are sensitive enough that a shark in the final moments of an approach, when its eyes may be rolled back in their sockets for protection and its other senses are overwhelmed by the proximity of the prey, can navigate entirely by the electrical signature of a heartbeat. It finds its prey by the sound of its heart. Think about that in this quiet moment as you drift towards sleep. The Megalodon found its prey by the sound of its heart, by the electrical whisper of a living body in the water, by the invisible field that every beating heart broadcasts outward into the sea around it. There is something in this that feels less like hunting and more like listening. Less like violence and more like a kind of terrible attention. Now let us talk about what it was listening for. The Megalodon did not live on fish, though it certainly ate them. Fish were available and nutritious and easy to catch, but they did not provide the caloric density that an animal of this size required. What the Megalodon required were large marine mammals, whales, and the Miocene Ocean was full of them. The whales of 20 million years ago were not quite the whales, you know. The great baleen whales, the blue, the fin, the humpback, were smaller then, still evolving toward the giants they would eventually become. But there were ancient sperm whales already, and primitive baleen whales of various sizes, and a spectacular diversity of cetaceans that no longer exist, creatures that occupied ecological niche that have since been filled by different animals, or that simply ran out of time before the world changed enough to need them. The Miocene was, in many ways, a golden age of cetacean diversity. The ocean was warm and productive, the food chains rich and complex, and whales had been evolving in the sea for tens of millions of years, filling it with their forms and their songs and their enormous energy-rich bodies. For the Megalodon, this diversity of whales was simply a menu. Different prey required different strategies, and here is where the patience of the Megalodon expressed itself most fully, not in any single approach or any single attack, but in the long, unhurried process of selecting prey, assessing vulnerability, and choosing the moment with the kind of cold precision that has no name in human experience, because nothing in human experience quite prepares us for it. The younger whales were preferred. The calves, the juveniles, the animals not yet grown into the full size and power of adulthood. This is not cruelty. The concept has no purchase here. In a world that preceded morality by many millions of years, it is simply efficiency. A young whale is slower than an adult. It tires more quickly. It is less experienced in the behaviors that might protect it. The tight grouping with other whales, the way adults will position themselves between a calf and a perceived threat, the deep dives that a young animal cannot sustain as long. A young whale represents calories at a lower cost of energy. And the Megalodon, in its patient and wordless way, understood this. The approach would begin from below. This is what the fossil evidence, combined with what we know about shark hunting behavior, suggests. The Megalodon approached its large prey from beneath and behind, using the darker water below as concealment, rising slowly through the water column in a long, gradual ascent that kept it in the prey animal's blind spot for as long as possible. The whale at the surface, breathing and swimming in the bright Miocene sun, would have had no warning. The water below it would have looked the same as it always did, deep and blue and apparently empty, but it was not empty. And here is the silence. Here is that particular stillness that precedes enormous things. In the last moments of the approach, as the Megalodon rose through the final few fathoms of water, closing the distance between itself and the whale above in slow and deliberate increments, the water around it would have changed in ways that the prey animal's own senses could theoretically detect. Pressure changes could theoretically detect. Pressure changes, subtle disturbances in the flow. Sometimes prey animals do detect these changes. Sometimes they dive or accelerate or bunch together with others of their kind in that instinctive clustering. That is the whale's best defense. Sometimes the Megalodon's approach fails, and the animal swims away, and the Megalodon turns and descends, and continues its patient patrol of the middle ocean, as unhurried as the current itself. But sometimes the whale does not detect it. Sometimes the water gives nothing away. Sometimes the silence holds all the way to the end. And the last thing in the world before everything changes is a stillness so complete that it might be peace. The strike, when it came, was not like anything we have language for. We can reconstruct it from the evidence, from the bite marks on fossil bones, from the biomechanics of the Megalodon's jaw, from what we know about how large sharks attack large prey. The initial bite was not aimed at killing, it was aimed at disabling. At the fins, at the tail, at the flippers, the locomotor structures that allowed the prey animal to escape. A whale with a damaged tail cannot dive to safety. A whale with a damaged flipper cannot swim at speed. The Megalodon, in that first strike, was not ending the hunt, it was winning it. The fossil record confirms this strategy with a directness that scientists still find striking. Whale bones from the Miocene, real bones, pulled from real rock, sitting in real museum collections, carry Megalodon bite marks that are clustered around the locomotor regions, not around the head, not around the center of the body, but around the fins and the tail. This was not random, this was a pattern, and patterns in biology mean behavior, and behavior, preserved in fossil bone across 15 million years, means that we are seeing something real. We are seeing the Megalodon hunting. We are seeing its strategy written in the bones of its prey, in the language of damage and death and deep time. After the disabling strike, the Megalodon would wait. This too is strategy. This too is patience. A wounded whale in the water loses blood, and blood in the water is a signal that the Megalodon could read with extraordinary sensitivity. A few molecules of blood per million molecules of water, detectable at distances that seem impossible, until you understand the olfactory anatomy of sharks, the way water is channeled through their nostrils in a continuous flow, the way their brains devote enormous processing power to the analysis of chemical signals in that flow. The Megalodon could smell what was happening from a distance that would seem, by human standards, like magic. It would circle, not frantically, never frantically, slowly, at a distance, maintaining its awareness of the wounded animal while conserving the energy it would need for what came next. The whale, weakened and slowing, would eventually stop fighting the inevitable, and the Megalodon would close the distance one final time, with the same patience it had shown throughout, the same slow economy of movement, the same terrible and wordless attention. Ancient sea turtles moved through this ocean too, and they were not safe. The shell of a sea turtle, which is protection against almost every predator in the modern ocean, was simply not relevant to the Megalodon. A bite force of 40,000 pounds per square inch turns the calculus of shell versus predator into a very short calculation. Fossil sea turtle shells from the Miocene carry bite marks consistent with Megalodon teeth. The shell crushed rather than pierced. The whole architecture of the turtle's defense collapsed by a single application of that extraordinary jaw. The turtle would not have seen it coming. The turtle would have been swimming in its slow and deliberate and ancient way, as sea turtles have swum for over 200 million years, and then the world would have ended. The prehistoric dolphins, the ancient sirenians, the manatee-like creatures that grazed the seagrass beds of Miocene coastal waters. All of them shared the ocean with this predator. All of them navigated a world in which the Megalodon was not a distant theoretical threat but an immediate and continuous reality. Evolution responded as it always does, by selecting for behaviors and morphologies that improved survival. Whales that grouped more tightly. Dolphins that developed faster. Sprints. Sea turtles that dove deeper. The Megalodon shaped the evolution of everything around it, pressing against the other species of its ocean the way all apex predators press, invisibly, constantly. Over millions of years, its presence a selective force more powerful than almost anything else in the environment. This is what it means to be truly apex, not just to hunt and to eat, but to reshape the world around you through the simple fact of your existence. Every animal in the Miocene ocean was, in some sense, a response to the Megalodon. Every behavioral adaptation, every morphological change, every evolutionary innovation, all of it was written, at least in part, in the shadow of that enormous form moving through the deep water below. And through all of it, the Megalodon remained patient. It did not rage through the ocean. It did not chase and pursue and exhaust itself in fruitless effort. It moved through its world the way the deep current moves, slowly, powerfully, without apparent effort, going where it was going with a certainty that needed no urgency to express itself. It had been here for millions of years before the particular hunt we have been imagining. It would be here for millions of years after. Time was not something it experienced as pressure. The ocean was not something it experienced as a challenge. It simply moved through the blue water and breathed through its gills and sensed the world around it with senses so acute they bordered on the supernatural, and waited for the moment that was always, eventually, coming. The silence before the strike, the stillness in the water, the whale at the surface, breathing in the ancient sun, not yet knowing what is rising toward it from below. You are floating somewhere between these worlds now, between the ancient ocean and the quiet room you are lying, between the story and the sleep that waits just past its edges. The water around you is warm and dark, and patient. There is nothing here that will harm you. There is only the current and the blue dark, and the slow rhythmic movement of enormous things, passing at a great and comfortable distance. You breathe, the ocean breath with you, and somewhere far below, moving in its unhurried and magnificent way through water that is older than memory, the greatest hunter the sea has ever known, continues its endless patient patrol. Not frantic, never frantic, just inevitable. There is a particular kind of awe that has nothing to do with fear. You have felt it before, even if you have never named it. Standing at the base of a mountain and tilting your head back until the summit disappears into cloud, watching a thunderstorm move across an open plain from a distance safe enough to appreciate the beauty of it. The curtains of rain, the branching light, the slow and majestic rotation of something so large it makes the sky look small, seeing for the first time, in person rather than in a photograph, one of the great cathedrals of the world, the way the stone rises above you not threateningly, but almost tenderly, as if the building is leaning over you the way a parent leans over a child, enormous and protective, and somehow, despite its size, intimate. This is the awe that the Megalodon deserves. Not the sharp, clenching fear of something dangerous, not the spike of adrenaline that the word shark sometimes produces in people who have absorbed too many thriller films, too many sensationalized headlines, too many images designed to make the ocean feel hostile rather than ancient and indifferent and magnificent. The Megalodon is not a horror story. It is not a monster. it is something far more interesting than either of those things. It is a monument B, built not from stone or steel, but from muscle and cartilage and the slow, patient work of evolution across 20 million years. The ocean's greatest engineering project, its most ambitious design, its most complete expression of what a predator, given enough time and enough sea room, can become. And it was very, very large. Let us talk about size tonight, in the gentle way that large things deserve to be talked about, not to alarm, not to thrill with danger, but to wonder, to sit with the numbers the way you might sit with a piece of music that moves you, not trying to analyze it or explain it away, just letting it be what it is and feeling what it makes you feel. Size, at the scale of the Megalodon, is not really a fact. It is an experience, and even if we cannot experience it directly, we can approach it, we can circle it slowly, the way the Megalodon itself circled its prey, and appreciate it from every angle. The best current scientific estimates place the Megalodon at somewhere between 50 and 65 feet in length for the largest adults. These numbers come from multiple methodologies, from the relationship between two size and body length and living sharks, from vertebral dimensions, from comparative anatomy, from the accumulated work of dozens of paleontologists refining their models over decades. There is some debate at the margins, as there always is in science, when the evidence is fragmentary and the subject is genuinely difficult. But the broad outlines are settled. The Megalodon was approximately 50 to 65 feet long, and that number, sitting quietly on the page, does not do what it needs to do until you begin to translate it into the world you can see and touch. So let us translate. 50 feet. Find that length in your mind and try to see it. If you are lying in a bed right now, as you very likely are, your bed is probably somewhere between 6 and 7 feet long. The Megalodon, at its conservative lower estimate, was the length of 7 or 8 of those beds laid end to end. If you were to line up the Megalodon from nose to tail in a standard school gymnasium, it would span the full length of the basketball court and still have several feet remaining on each end, pressing against the walls as if the room were simply not built for it. Which, of course, it was not. No room ever built by human hands was built for the Megalodon, because no human hand existed while the Megalodon was alive, and if it had, no one would have been building gymnasiums. Or think of a school bus, that familiar yellow shape, long and boxy and slightly larger than you remember, whenever you stand next to one as an adult, the vehicle that was once the entire geography of your morning. The school bus is approximately 35 feet long. The Megalodon, at 50 feet, was longer than 1.5 school buses. At 65 feet, it was nearly 2 school buses long. Imagine 2 school buses parked end to end in front of you. Now remove the buses and replace them with a single continuous living animal, a single creature, breathing and moving and perceiving the world around it with senses so acute they bordered on supernatural, filling the space that 2 school buses would fill with one body, one mind, one heartbeat. Then there is the Boeing 737, the fuselage, the body of the plane, not counting the wings, of a standard Boeing 737 is approximately 94 feet long. The Megalodon was shorter than this, yes, but not by as much as you might expect. The largest Megalodon individuals, at 65 feet, occupied roughly 2/3 of the length of that fuselage, and unlike the fuselage, which is hollow, a thin aluminum shell filled mostly with air and seats, and the particular anxious stillness of people hoping the flight will be smooth. The Megalodon was solid, dense, full of muscle and cartilage and the dense mineral weight of those enormous teeth, and the vast biological machinery required to keep something this large alive and functioning and moving through the water. Weight is where the numbers become truly difficult to hold. The current best estimates for Megalodon body mass range from around 50 tons at the conservative end to over 100 tons for the largest individuals. 100 tons. The unit is familiar. We use it for cargo ships, for large vehicles, for industrial machinery, but applied to a living animal it becomes something else entirely. The largest land animal that has ever existed is the Argentinosaurus, a sauropod dinosaur estimated at around 80 to 100 tons. The Megalodon, in other words, may have been comparable in mass to the largest dinosaur ever to walk the earth. It achieved this mass not by being long and sprawling across a landscape, the way the great sauropods did, but by being dense and compact, and three-dimensional in the way that only an ocean animal can be, filling volume in all directions rather than just length. The blue whale, which is alive today, and which holds the title of the largest animal currently living on Earth, reaches lengths of around 100 feet and weights of up to 200 tons. The blue whale is larger than the Megalodon, larger in fact than anything we know of in the fossil record. But the blue whale is a filter feeder. It is a gentle giant in the most literal sense, sieving tiny crustaceans from the water. Through its baleen plates, its enormous size supported by a diet of creatures you could hold in a cupped palm, the Megalodon, at roughly half the blue whale's length and perhaps half its weight, was doing something the blue whale has never needed to do. It was using that mass as a weapon. It was hunt in things nearly as large as itself, bringing that 50, 60, 70 tons to bear in a single focus strike, all of that weight and momentum, concentrated into a jaw that could deliver 40,000 pounds of force per square inch. The jaw itself deserves a moment. A fully reconstructed Megalodon jaw, assembled from the teeth of multiple individuals, scaled to the estimated proportions of a large adult, measures approximately 9 to 10 feet in width and perhaps 7 feet in height when fully opened. These are the dimensions of a doorway. Not a grand doorway, not the entrance to a cathedral, but an ordinary interior doorway of the kind you pass through dozens of times a day without thinking about it. The door to your bedroom, perhaps, or the door to the bathroom, or the door you came through earlier this evening, before you settled in for the night. That doorway, that ordinary and unremarkable passage from one room to another, is approximately the size of the Megalodon's open mouth. There is a famous series of photographs taken at various natural history museums over the decades that show people standing inside reconstructed Megalodon jaws. Multiple people, sometimes 4 or 5, standing upright inside the mouth of the reconstruction, their heads well below the upper jaw, their feet on the floor between the lower teeth. The photographs exist to provide scale, to make the size tangible, to give human bodies as a reference point for something that otherwise resists comprehension. They work. Looking at those photographs, something shifts in your understanding, not toward fear, but toward that particular quality of awe we are talking about tonight. The quality that says, this was real, this existed, this was not a story or a myth or an exaggeration. Something this large once opened its mouth in the warm water of an ancient sea, and the sea was large enough to contain it. The teeth themselves, which we have already spent time with in an earlier part of our journey together, bear returning to in the context of size. The largest confirmed Megalodon teeth measure just under 7.5 inches along the slant height. But to understand what this means in the context of the jaw, you need to understand that these are not the front teeth. The largest teeth in a shark's jaw are not at the very front. They are slightly further back, the second and third rows of the functional teeth. The front teeth, which are the ones doing the initial work of biting, are somewhat smaller. The overall effect, when you imagine the full set of teeth arranged in their rows in that 10-foot jaw, is of an instrument so specifically and so completely engineered for its purpose that the word designed keeps wanting to be used, even though no designer was involved. Evolution designed it. 20 million years of selection pressure, of individuals that were slightly better hunters surviving slightly longer and passing their traits to slightly more offspring, of the ocean itself acting as the architect, shaping the Megalodon through the slow accumulation of successful moments. Every dimension of that animal, the length of its body, the depth of its chest, the width of its jaw, the curvature of its teeth, the arrangement of its sensory systems, was arrived at through this process. Not planned, not intended. but no less precise for being unplanned. The ocean knew what it was doing, in the way that oceans know things, which is through time rather than through thought. The pectoral fins of the Megalodon, those wing-like fins that extended from the sides of its body, providing lift and stability and maneuverability in the water, are estimated to have been roughly 10 to 12 feet long. 12 feet, the wingspan of a large albatross, one of the most magnificent soaring birds on Earth, is about 11 feet. The Megalodon's pectoral fins were approximately the size of an albatross's wings. Imagine those fins moving in the slow and liquid way that large shark fins move, the water flowing over their surface in smooth laminar sheets, generating lift with the same aerodynamic principles that keep aircraft aloft, because water and air are both fluids, and the physics of moving through them is, at the fundamental level, the same. The dorsal fin, that iconic triangular fin, the one that has become the universal symbol of shark, the one that appears above the surface in every dramatic ocean scene, on the Megalodon would have stood approximately 5 feet tall. 5 feet, the height of a reasonably tall person. A fin taller than many humans moving above the surface of the Miocene Ocean like a slow, dark sail, marking the presence of something below that the surface could only hint at, and a tail, the caudal fin, the great crescent-shaped tail that drove all of this mass through the water. Estimated at 15 feet or more from tip to tip, roughly the height of a 1.5-story building, moving back and forth in those slow, powerful sweeps that we talked about earlier. Each sweep displacing water with a force that would have been felt by any animal within a considerable radius. Not as sound exactly, but as pressure, as a change in the water around them that their lateral lines would have registered, and their nervous systems would have processed, and their bodies would have responded to with whatever response evolution had prepared them for. This is what moved through the ancient ocean, this specific collection of dimensions and masses and capabilities, arranged into a single living body, breathing through gills that each measured several feet across, pumping blood through a heart estimated at the size of a small car, engine maintaining a body temperature slightly warmer than the surrounding water through the metabolic heat generated by all that muscle working all the time, perceiving the ocean around it through senses distributed across its entire surface, thinking, in whatever way a shark thinks, which is not the way we think, but is not nothing, about the water ahead and the pressure changes behind, and the electrical whisper of a heartbeat somewhere above. Wonder is the right response to this, not fear. Fear is for things that can reach you where you are, and the Megalodon cannot reach you where you are. It cannot reach you across 3 to 20 million years of time, across the vast distance between the Miocene and this quiet room, this warm bed, this gentle darkness. The Megalodon is as safe as a star, something you can look at with complete openness, something that asks nothing of you, except your attention and your willingness to be astonished. And there is so much to be astonished by the sheer scale of the thing, by the fact that the ocean was once large enough and rich enough and rich enough and wild enough to support an animal of this size and numbers sufficient to sustain a population across 20 million years, by the engineering of it, the elegant, unplanned, perfectly realized engineering of a body shaped by nothing but time and pressure into something so complete that it ruled every ocean on Earth without a rival for longer than the human mind can comfortably imagine, by the fact that it was real. That is perhaps the most astonishing thing of all. Not a myth, not an exaggeration, not the projection of human fears onto an indifferent ocean, a real animal with a real heartbeat, moving through real water under a real sun that was the same sun that shines today, older now by 20 million years, but still burning, still sending its light down through the surface of an ocean that still exists, still carries its ancient currents, still holds in its deepest places the sediment where the Megalodon's teeth are waiting to be found. The ocean is still here. The size of the thing that once lived in it is still, somehow, present, in the scale of the deep water, in the depth of the trenches, and the width of the open ocean that stretches to every horizon. The ocean is large enough for the Megalodon because the ocean is large enough for everything. And you are floating in it tonight, small and warm and safe, drifting in the current of the story, held by the water that once held giants. Let the size of it settle over you like warmth. Let the wonder of it be the last thing your waking mind holds before sleep takes it gently from your hands. Something that large was real. And the ocean that made it is still here, still breathing, still vast, still full of more than we will ever fully know. Every story has an ending. Not every ending has an explanation. This is one of the things that separates the stories we tell from the stories that actually happened, the ones written not in ink or in memory, but in stone and sediment and the slow accumulation of geological time. The stories we tell have conclusions we can point to, causes we can name, moments we can identify as the turning point, the final scene, the last line before the page goes blank. We are creatures who need endings to make sense, who find comfort in the closed circle of a narrative that knows where it is going and arrives there cleanly. We tell stories partly because they give us this, the satisfaction of a shape, a trajectory, a destination. But the earth does not tell stories the way we do. The earth tells stories in a language made of time and pressure and chemical change. And when those stories end, they often end without resolution, without a final scene, without a cause that can be named cleanly and pointed to and filed away. The ending simply happens, spread across thousands of years, distributed across the entire surface of the planet, happening simultaneously and unevenly, and without any single moment you could call the last. And then it is over, and what remains is the silence after, and the question that the silence keeps asking, in its patient and permanent way to anyone willing to listen. What happened? The Megalodon disappeared approximately 3.5 million years ago. Sit with that sentence for a moment, not the number. We have already spent time with numbers tonight, and you know by now how to hold them, how to feel their weight without being crushed by it. Sit instead with the word disappeared, because that is, in the most precise scientific sense, exactly what happened. The Megalodon was here, present in every ocean, leaving its teeth in sediments across the entire planet, the undisputed apex of the greatest ecosystem the Earth has ever sustained, and then, over a period of time that feels short by geological standards, but is in absolute terms vast beyond ordinary comprehension, it was gone. The last Megalodon tooth in the fossil record is dated to approximately 3.6 million years ago. This does not necessarily mean that the last Megalodon died at exactly this moment. Fossil preservation is imperfect, and the absence of fossils is not the same as the absence of animals, but the pattern is clear and consistent across multiple sites and multiple ocean basins. The teeth become rarer through this period, the record thins, and then it stops. The Megalodon, which had been one of the most geographically widespread and temporally persistent large predators in the history of animal life, simply ceases to leave evidence of its existence. It vanished, and we do not know with any certainty that satisfies completely why. This uncertainty is not a failure of science. It is a condition of deep time, a reminder that the further back we look, the more the details blur, the more the record becomes fragmentary, the more the story resists the neat causation we want to impose on it. We have theories, good ones, supported by evidence, argued carefully by serious scientists who have spent careers thinking about nothing else. But no single theory explains everything. No single cause accounts for the full complexity of what appears to have been a global extinction event for one of the most successful predators the planet has ever produced. And there is something in this uncertainty that feels, tonight, not like frustration, but like an invitation. An invitation to sit with the not knowing, to let the mystery be a mystery, to understand that some endings are not conclusions, they are questions, and the questions are part of the meaning. The world was changing. This is where every theory begins, because it is the one thing all the evidence agrees on. Because it is the one thing all the evidence agrees on. The world of 3 to 4 million years ago was in the middle of a profound transformation, a shift in the planet's climate that would eventually culminate in the Pleistocene ice ages and reshape life on Earth in ways that are still being felt today. The planet was cooling. Not rapidly. Nothing in geology is rapid, except the handful of catastrophic events that punctuate the slow rhythms of deep time, but cooling steadily, measurably, over hundreds of thousands of years, as the complex system of ocean currents and atmospheric chemistry and orbital mechanics that governs the Earth's temperature shifted toward a colder configuration. The polar ice caps grew. As they grew, they changed the ocean. Water locked into ice is water removed from the sea, and as the ice sheets expanded, sea levels dropped and ocean temperatures fell, and the warm, shallow coastal seas that had been the nurseries of the Miocene, those productive sun-warmed shallows where whale calves were born and grew, where the food chains were richest and most complex, began to shrink. The warm water retreated toward the equator. The ocean reorganized itself around a colder reality. For the Megalodon, this reorganization was not merely inconvenient, it was existential. The Megalodon was a warm-water predator, not warm-blooded in the way mammals are warm-blooded, but dependent on warm water in the way that all large ectothermic animals are dependent on ambient temperature. The water temperature affected its metabolism, its digestion, its ability to maintain the energy budget of an animal that required enormous quantities of food simply to exist. As the warm water retreated, the Megalodon's comfort table range shrank with it. The tropical and subtropical seas remained available, but the rich temperate coastal zones, the whale nurseries, the productive shallows, became colder and less hospitable, and then the gateway closed. This is one of the most geologically dramatic events of the late Pliocene, and one of the most consequential for ocean life. The Isthmus of Panama, that narrow land bridge connecting North and South America, formed approximately 3 million years ago, closing the seaway that had connected the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans for tens of millions of years. This closure was not sudden. It happened gradually, as the tectonic forces driving the North and South American plates toward each other slowly raised the seafloor between them until it became land. But the effect, when it was complete, was enormous. The closure of the Central American Seaway fundamentally altered the circulation of the world's oceans. The warm current that had flowed freely between the Atlantic and Pacific was blocked. Ocean circulation reorganized itself around the new geography. The Gulf Stream strengthened, sending warm water further north into the Atlantic. The Pacific, cut off from this circulation, cooled. The global pattern of whale migration, the routes that large marine mammals followed as they moved between feeding grounds and breeding grounds, the routes that the Megalodon had spent millions of years learning to predict and to use, changed. The whales moved. They followed the productivity, following the cold upwellings that brought nutrients from the deep and supported the krill and small fish that the great baleen whales lived on. They moved into colder, deeper waters. They moved into the high latitudes that were becoming, paradoxically, more productive even as they became colder, because cold water holds more oxygen, supports denser plankton blooms, feeds our acre food chains. The whales could follow this productivity because they were warm-blooded, insulated by their thick layers of blubber, capable of maintaining their body temperature regardless of the water around them. The Megalodon could not follow. Cold water was not its territory. The metabolism of a cold water apex predator is a different thing from the metabolism the Megalodon had evolved over 20 million years of warm tropical seas. It could not simply adapt to a colder ocean the way warm-blooded prey could adapt to it. As the whales moved into waters the Megalodon could not comfortably inhabit, the food supply that had sustained it for 20 million years began to disappear from the regions it could still access. And then there were the others. This is the part of the story that scientists have only recently begun to appreciate fully, and it is perhaps the most interesting part, not because it involves competition and conflict, which the popular imagination tends to fixate on, but because it involves something more subtle and more profound: the rise of new predators. not predators that could defeat the Megalodon in direct confrontation. Nothing could do that, not in any world we can plausibly imagine. But predators that were simply better suited to the world that was emerging, predators that could go where the Megalodon could not. Predators that hunted differently, more flexibly, more cooperatively, in ways that the Megalodon's solitary and size-dependent strategy could not match. The ancestors of the modern orca were among them. Early orcas were smaller than their modern descendants in some lineages, but they were already what orcas have always been: highly intelligent, deeply social, cooperative hunters of remarkable flexibility and adaptability. Where the Megalodon hunted alone, relying on size and power and the patient inevitability of its approach, the early orcas hunted together. They communicated, they coordinated, they developed strategies that could be passed from one individual to another. Cultural knowledge accumulating across generations in the way that only highly social animals with large brains can manage. They could hunt in cold water, they could follow the whales into the high latitudes, they could take prey in ways the Megalodon could not, through coordination rather than through brute force, through intelligence rather than through size. The early great white sharks were there too, already evolving into the apex predators they would become in the post-Megalodon ocean. Smaller and faster, and more flexible in their thermal tolerance, smaller and faster, able to operate in the cooler waters that the Megalodon found increasingly difficult. None of these animals killed the Megalodon. Let us be clear about this, because the popular narrative tends toward conflict, toward the satisfying drama of one predator defeating another. The orcas did not hunt the Megalodon to extinction. The great whites did not replace it through direct competition in any simple sense. What happened was more diffuse and more interesting than that. The new predators occupied the ecological space that the changing ocean was creating. The colder waters, the different prey, the new hunting grounds, while the Megalodon found its own ecological space shrinking, not through defeat, through irrelevance, through the slow and terrible process of becoming, gradually, a creature that the world no longer had room for. There is a theory, still debated but compelling, that the Megalodon's own success contributed to its end. An animal that requires so much food, that must consume tons of large marine mammals regularly to sustain its metabolism, is vulnerable in ways that smaller, more flexible predators are not. When the prey becomes scarce, the large predate, or suffers first and suffers most. A great white shark can survive on a diet of fish and seals when large whale prey is unavailable. The Megalodon, if the metabolic estimates are correct, could not. Its size, which was its greatest strength for 20 million years, became a vulnerability in a world that was reorganizing itself around scarcity. We do not know which of these factors was decisive. We do not know the precise sequence of events, the exact mechanism by which the last population of megalodons declined from hundreds to dozens, to a handful to none. We do not know whether the end was fast or slow by human standards, whether the last individuals died within a few generations of each other, or whether the population dwindled over tens of thousands of years, each generation slightly smaller and more scattered than the last. The intervals between individuals growing longer until one day, somewhere in a cooling ocean, the last one died. We do not know where it happened. We do not know what ocean basin was home to the last megalodon, which coastline it patrolled in its final years, what prey it found in a world that had moved on from the conditions that had made it possible. We do not know if there was a last tooth shed and a last breath taken and a last slow descent into water that closed over it without ceremony and without witness. We only know that it ended. And here is the thing about endings without explanations. They are not empty. They are full of everything we cannot say, everything the evidence does not tell us, everything that happened in the spaces between the data points where the real texture of events always lives. The uncertainty is not a hole in the story. It is the story. It is the reminder that the world is larger than our ability to account for it, that time erases more than it preserves, that some of the most important things that have ever happened without leaving enough of a record for us to read clearly. There is a kind of grief in this, if you let yourself feel it, a quiet grief for something magnificent that ended without anyone to mark its passing. In a world that would not produce anyone capable of missing it for another 3.5 million years, the Megalodon did not know it was disappearing. It did not know it was the last. It simply lived, as it had always lived, with the particular totality that characterizes all non-human life. Completely present in its own existence, without nostalgia for what was already gone or anticipation of what was coming. It was alive, and then it was not, and the ocean continued, and the world continued, and the cooling kept happening, and the ice kept growing, and the currents kept shifting, and life kept finding its way into the new spaces the changing world created. And now we are here, 3.5 million years later, in a world the Megalodon would not recognize and could not have imagined, trying to read its story from the fragments it left behind, trying to understand an ending that resists understanding, turning the mystery over in our hands the way you might turn a fossil tooth, feeling its weight, tracing its edges, knowing that it holds more than it will ever fully give up. Some endings have no final chapter. Some stories close not with a period, but with an ellipsis. Those 3 quiet dots that mean something continues here, beyond what the words can reach. The Megalodon story is one of these. It trails off into the cooling ocean, into the closing gateway, into the reorganizing currents, and the migrating whales and the rising intelligence of cooperative hunters in cold water. It trails off without a resolution we can name, and perhaps that is fitting. Perhaps it is right that something so ancient and so enormous and so complete shall hold end in mystery rather than in explanation. Perhaps the not knowing is a form of respect, a way of acknowledging that 20 million years of dominance, 20 million years of shaping the ocean and everything in it, deserves more than a neat causal sentence, deserves to remain, at least in part, beyond our reach. The ocean is still here, still cooling and warming with the long rhythms of the planet's breath, still moving in its great gyres and currents, still productive and complex and full of life that would astonish us if we could see all of it at once, still holding in its deepest places the sediment where the teeth are resting, where the story is written in a language we are still learning to read. The Megalodon is gone, and the mystery of its going is part of what it left behind, as real as the teeth, as durable as the fossil record, as deep as the water it once called home. Let the mystery settle over you now. Let the not knowing be enough. Let the ocean hold its secrets as it always has, as it always will, in the patient and ancient dark below. You are drifting now, between the knowing and the not knowing, between the story and the silence, between the world that was and the world that is, and somewhere in the space between the great shape of something enormous moves through deep water, patient, as always, unhurried as always. And then it is gone, and the ocean closes over it, and the water is still. We need to talk about the part of you that hopes, not the rational part, not the part that reads the evidence, and weighs the arguments and arrives at reasonable conclusions based on available data. That part of you already knows what the science says, and the science says, the Megalodon is gone. And that part of you accepts this the way it accepts other things it cannot change, with a quiet nod, a small resignation, a filing away of the fact into the appropriate 8 drawer. We need to talk about the other part, the part that when someone mentions the deep ocean, feels something stir, the part that when you watch a nature documentary, and the camera descends into the black water of the abyss and the narrator says that we have explored less than 20% of the ocean floor, feels something that is not quite hope and not quite fear, but lives in the neighborhood of both, a quickening, a leaning forward, a whispered and almost embarrassing thought that rises before you can stop it. What if something is still down there? You are not alone in this. You are not irrational for feeling it. You are not, despite what the more rigidly scientific corners of the internet might suggest, being foolish or credulous or insufficiently committed to empirical thinking. You are being human. You are doing something that humans have done for as long as there have been humans and oceans, and the darkness that the ocean keeps at its bottom. You are projecting your need for the enormous and the unknown onto the largest and least known space available to you. This is worth understanding, not to dismiss it, but to honor it, to look at it carefully and ask what it tells us. Not about the Megalodon, but about ourselves. First, let us be honest about the science, because honesty here is not a betrayal of wonder. It is, in its own way, a deeper form of it. Scientists are not hedging on this. They are not secretly uncertain, not quietly entertaining the possibility while maintaining a conservative public position. The scientific consensus on the extinction of the Megalodon is about as solid as scientific consensus gets in paleontology, which is a field accustomed to uncertainty and genuinely comfortable with saying so when uncertainty exists. This is not one of those cases. The Megalodon has been extinct for approximately 3.5 million years, and the reasons for this confidence are worth understanding because they are interesting in themselves. The ocean is large. This is true. The ocean covers approximately 71% of the Earth's surface, and its average depth is about 12,000 feet. The deepest point, the Challenger Deep in the Mariana Trench, reaches nearly 36,000 feet, 7 miles of water, stacked on top of each other, pressing down on a seafloor that exists in a darkness and a cold, and a pressure so extreme that exploring it requires technology more sophisticated than what we used to reach the moon. We have mapped the moon's surface in greater resolution than we have mapped much of the ocean floor. These facts are real, and they are remarkable, and they are part of why the ocean retains its mystery in a world where most mysteries have been solved. But here is the thing about the Megalodon specifically. The Megalodon was not a creature of the deep ocean. It was not hiding in the abyssal trenches, hovering in the crushing dark of the Mariana Trench, waiting to be discovered by the next submersible. The Megalodon was a coastal predator, a shallow water hunter, an animal whose prey, large marine mammals, whales, sea turtles, lived near the surface, breathed air, and required the productive coastal and open ocean environments where sunlight could penetrate and food chains could function at the scale required to sustain a population of the world's largest predators. An animal of the Megalodon size, hunting the prey the Megalodon hunted, in the waters the Megalodon would need to inhabit, would be visible. This is the core of the scientific argument, and it is a strong one. Whale carcasses with catastrophic bite wounds consistent with a 60-foot shark would wash ashore. They would be found by the coastal communities that have been living on the guide edges of the world's oceans for thousands of years, by the fishing vessels that have crossed and recrossed every navigable ocean for centuries, by the satellite tracking systems that now monitor ocean surface temperatures and whale movements, and shipping routes with a comprehensiveness that would have seemed miraculous a generation ago. Fresh Megalodon teeth that had not been sitting in ocean sediment for millions of years, and therefore lacked the dark mineralization that distinguishes fossil teeth from recent ones, would be dredged up in fishing nets and found on beaches. Breaches would be reported, that characteristic behavior of large sharks attacking prey from below, launching themselves and their prey partially out of the water, visible from miles away on a clear day. None of these things have been found, not in the scientific record, not in the verified observations of marine biologists or oceanographers or the thousands of researchers who spend their careers at sea, watching the ocean with professional attention. The ocean is better observed now than it has ever been in human history, and the Megalodon is not in it. The evidence for its absence is, paradoxically, one of the most comprehensively supported negative findings in all of natural science, and yet the myth persists. And yet the question gets asked in comment sections and late-night conversations and the particular fertile ground of human imagination that activates whenever someone mentions the deep ocean, and yet movies get made, and documentaries, some of them deliberately and rather cynically misleading, attract enormous audiences, and the Megalodon remains one of the most searched, most discussed, most culturally present, extinct animals on the planet, more famous in some circles than animals that are still alive, more vivid in the popular imagination than creatures you could to encounter in the actual ocean today. Why? This is the question worth sitting with tonight, as you drift in that comfortable space between waking and sleep, where the rational and the mythological live closer together than they do in daylight. Why does the Megalodon persist in our imagination with a tenacity that the science cannot fully extinguish? Why do we need it to still be there? Part of the answer is ancient, older than the Megalodon itself, or at least as old as the first human who stood at the edge of the sea and looked out at the water and felt a particular combination of attraction and unease that the ocean has always produced in land-living creatures. The ocean is, for humans, fundamentally unknowable in a way that the land is not. We can walk across the land, we can climb its mountains and descend into its caves and cross its deserts and its forests with our own bodies, under our own power, breathing the air that belongs to us. The land is our element. We are shaped for it by millions of years of evolution that built us for walking on solid ground, for navigating three-dimensional space with our eyes and our hands and our upright posture. The ocean is not our element. We cannot breathe in it. We cannot move through it with anything like the efficiency of the creatures that live there. We sink without effort and swim with enormous effort, and the darkness below us when we float on the surface is a darkness our eyes are not built for, and our instincts are not equipped to read. Every human who has ever floated in deep water has felt it. That awareness of the depth below, the sense of the vast column of dark water between your floating body and the seafloor, the knowledge that the surface you are floating on is a boundary between your world and an entirely other world that you are only visiting, and that visiting it is contingent on things going well. Into this darkness, every human culture that has lived near the ocean has placed monsters. This is not a coincidence. It is not ignorance, or not only ignorance. It is a psychological necessity, a way of externalizing the formless unease that the ocean produces and giving it a shape, a name, a body that can be imagined, and therefore in some way managed. The Norse had the Kraken, the ancient Greeks had Scylla and Charybdis, and the sea monsters that lurked at the edges of their maps. The Scandinavian tradition speaks of the Hafgufa, a creature so large it was mistaken for an island. Coastal cultures around the world, from the Pacific Islands to the Caribbean to the Mediterranean, have their own versions of the deep-sea giant, the thing that lives below the surface, that is larger than any living thing has a right to be, that represents everything the ocean contains that we cannot see and cannot control. The Megalodon fits perfectly into this tradition, almost too perfectly, which is part of why it has become the cultural phenomenon it is. It is not a mythological creature, it is a real one, with a real fossil record, real teeth you can hold in your real hand. Its reality gives the myth a foundation that purely imaginary sea monsters cannot claim. You cannot dismiss the Megalodon the way you can dismiss the Kraken, because the Megalodon demonstrably existed. The teeth are there. The bite marks on the bones are there. The 20 million years of fossil evidence are there. The reality of its past existence lends a kind of borrowed plausibility to the fantasy of its continued existence, even when the science says otherwise. And there is something else, something more personal, more interior, that the persistence of the Megalodon myth speaks to. We live in a world that is comprehensively mapped. Every mountain, every river, every coastline, every city and road and field on the surface of the land has been surveyed, photographed, named, and filed. Satellites look down at the Earth's surface with a resolution fine enough to read a newspaper headline, and the aggregate of this surveillance means that there are essentially no places left on the land where something large and unknown could be hiding. The large animals of the land are known. We have found them, cataloged them, measured them, watched them with camera traps in their most remote habitats. The era of terrestrial zoological discovery, that extraordinary period when European naturalists we're regularly encountering animals that no Western scientist had ever described. When each expedition to a new continent or island might return with drawings of creatures that seemed impossible, is essentially over. The land has given up its secrets, or most of them. The ocean has not. The ocean remains the last place on Earth where the genuinely unknown is still possible. New species of fish are discovered regularly, new invertebrates, new microorganisms, new communities of life clustered around hydrothermal vents or cold seeps on the abyssal plain. Even among the larger animals, the ocean occasionally surprises. The giant squid, which was known from washed-up carcasses for centuries but only photographed alive for the first time in 2004, and only filmed in its natural deep-sea habitat for the first time in 2012, the colossal squid, even larger, remains almost entirely unstudied in its living state. These are large animals, real animals, that the ocean hid from us for the entire history of human civilization and only recently, reluctantly, revealed. So the ocean is a place where being surprised is still possible, where the next dive, the next dredge, the next deep-sea camera deployment might return something that redraws the map of the known. And into this genuine possibility, this relay sent scientifically legitimate acknowledgement that the ocean holds more than we have yet found. The imagination inserts its deepest wish. What if the biggest surprise of all is still waiting? The Megalodon is not waiting. We have been through this, and the reasoning is sound, and the science is clear. But the wish is not really about the Megalodon. The Megalodon is just the shape the wish has taken, the specific form that the deeper and more general desire has found to express itself. The desire is not really for a specific extinct shark. The desire is for a world that still has room for the enormous and the unknown, for an Earth that has not yet given up all its secrets, for an ocean deep enough to hide something magnificent, for the possibility, however remote, that the world is still larger than our knowledge of it. And here's the thing, the world is still larger than our knowledge of it, just not in the way the Megalodon myth suggests. The ocean genuinely is full of things we do not know. The deep sea genuinely is one of the least explored environments on Earth. The biological diversity of the ocean is genuinely staggering and genuinely understudied. And the history of marine biology is genuinely full of surprises large enough to warrant humility about what we think we know. The Megalodon is not coming back, but wonder is not contingent on the Megalodon. Wonder is available everywhere the ocean is available, which is most of the surface of the Earth. Wonder is available in every cubic mile of water that has never been directly observed by a human eye, in every species we have not yet found, in every behavior of every known species that we have not yet understood, in the deep convection currents that move heat around the planet, and the bioluminescent light shows in the midnight zone, and the ancient chemistry of the hydrothermal vents where life exists, and conditions that would kill almost anything we are familiar with. The ocean is full of wonder. It does not need the Megalodon to be wonderful. It was wonderful before the Megalodon evolved. And it was wonderful while the Megalodon lived in it, and it is wonderful now. 3.5 million years after the Megalodon's passing, and it will be wonderful long after every human being alive today is gone, and the slow work of geological time has erased the traces of our civilization the way it erased the body of the Megalodon, leaving only fragments, only the durable things, only the teeth. We keep the myth alive because we need the ocean to be larger than we are. We need the dark water to hold something we cannot name. We need the deep places to be genuinely deep, genuinely other, genuinely beyond us in some important way. This need is not childish. It is not something to be educated out of or argued away. It is one of the most essentially human things about us. This reaching toward the unknown, this insistence that the world must be larger than what we have so far managed to map of it. The Megalodon, extinct and undeniable and magnificent, gives this need a face, and perhaps that is enough. Perhaps the myth does not need to be true to be real in the ways that matter. perhaps the cultural persistence of the Megalodon. The movies, the books, the breathless documentaries, the late-night conversations about what might still be moving in the deep water is itself a kind of fossil, a preserved impression of something ancient and important about human consciousness, about our relationship with the ocean, about the part of us that has always stood at the water's edge and felt the pull of what lies beyond the visible. The ocean keeps its secrets. Not the Megalodon. That secret has been told in teeth and in time, in fossil bone, and in the patient work of scientists who have spent their careers reconstructing a world none of us will ever see. But other secrets, deeper ones, the kind that have no name yet because we have not yet found them, the kind that are waiting in the cold dark of the abyss for the day when some instrument we have not yet invented descends far enough to find them. Those secrets are there. The ocean is still large enough for wonder. You are floating in it now, in the dark behind your eyes, in the warm current of the story that has been carrying you through this ancient and enormous world. The water around you is deep and patient and full of things you will never fully know. And somewhere at the very edge of the visible, where the blue light fades to black and the known world gives way to the unknown, something stirs. It is not the Megalodon, but it is something. And the ocean, vast and ancient, and magnificently indifferent to our need to name everything we find in it, keeps its counsel, as it always has, as it always will. You have traveled far tonight, not in the way that leaves you tired, not in the way of airports and traffic and the particular exhaustion of moving a body through the physical world with all its friction and noise and demand. You have traveled in the older way, the way that children travel before they learn to stay still, before the world teaches them that imagination is something to be managed rather than followed. You have traveled the way the mind travels, when it is given permission to go somewhere real, somewhere that exists not in geography but in time. That other dimension that we move through in only one direction. Always forward, always away from what was, but that the imagination can traverse freely, can move through backward and sideways, and in great leaping arcs that cover millions of years in a single breath. You went back 23 million years tonight. You floated in a warm mew, in a sea that no human eye ever witnessed. You held in your mind the weight of a fossil tooth, that dark and perfect fragment of a life so remote from yours that the distance between you and it makes the distance between continents seem trivial. You watched, from a safe and comfortable distance, the most patient predator that ever moved through salt water, watched it circle and descend and rise with that terrible and beautiful inevitability. You tried to hold in your mind the size of something so large that the trying itself was a kind of pleasure, a reaching toward a scale that the mind cannot quite grasp but enjoys reaching for. You sat with the mystery of its ending. You explored the myth that its ending left behind, the shape of the wish, the form of the need. You floated in the space between what we know and what we will never know, and you found that space comfortable rather than alarming, full rather than empty. And now we are coming home, the way you come home after a long journey, slowly, gratefully, with a new appreciation for the familiar things. The warmth of your bed, the weight of the blanket, the particular quality of the darkness in this room, which is your darkness. The darkness you know, lit by whatever small light finds its way under the door or through the curtains, mapped by the furniture whose shapes you could navigate it in your sleep, because you have navigated them in your sleep, because you have navigated them in your sleep. Because this room knows you, and you know this room in the wordless reciprocal way that people know the spaces where they rest. You are here, you are safe, and the ocean is still out there. This is the thing to hold on to. In these last soft minutes before sleep takes you completely, the ocean is still out there. Right now, as you lie in this room in this particular darkness, the ocean is doing what it has always done, moving in its great slow circles, breathing in its ideal rhythm, holding in its depths the same cold silence that it held 23 million years ago when the Megalodon moved through it like a living shadow. The water that covered the Megalodon's back as it swam is still water. It has cycled through the atmosphere and fallen as rain, and run into rivers and evaporated, and condensed and fallen again, thousands of times over. But it is still water, still H2O, water, still H2O, still the same fundamental substance that has been on this planet since before life existed, and will be here long after the last life ends. The ocean is continuous. This is perhaps the most astonishing thing about it, and the most comforting. Not continuous in the sense of unchanged. The ocean has changed enormously over geological time, in temperature and chemistry and circulation, and the life it contains. But continuous in the sense of unbroken. There has never been a moment in the last 4 billion years when the Earth did not have an ocean. Through the mass extinctions and the ice ages, and the continental rearrangements and the meteor impacts and all the other catastrophes that punctuate the long story of this planet, the ocean persisted, diminished sometimes, rearranged, altered in its chemistry and its temperature and its boundaries, but never gone, never absent, always here, always moving, always doing the deep work of regulating the planet's temperature and cycling its nutrients and harboring the majority of its life. The Megalodon swam in this ocean, and tonight, you are sleeping beside it. Think about that in the gentle, unfocused way that is available to you now, in this state between waking and sleep where thoughts can be large and loose and impressionistic, rather than sharp and logical and sequential. You are sleeping beside the same ocean, not the same water, perhaps, though some of those molecules are certainly there, cycled back in the ceaseless planetary circulation that connects every water molecule on Earth to every other one, eventually given enough time. But the same ocean, the same body of water continuous across 4 billion years, still deep in the places where it was deep when the Megalodon swam, still cold at the bottom, still dark in the places that light has never reached, still moving in the slow rhythms that have governed it since before there was life to notice them. There is a smallness that comes with this thought. A particular quality of smallness that is not diminishment, not the smallness of being made to feel unimportant or irrelevant or lost. It is the smallness of proportion, the comfortable grounding, almost physical sensation of understanding your actual size in relation to the actual size of things. You are one person, in one room, in one night, on one planet that has been turning for 4.5 billion years and will continue turning for billions more. The ocean outside is older than anything you will ever touch. The darkness at its bottom has never been interrupted by anything as brief and as bright as human civilization. And you are here, in the middle of all of it, breathing. Your breath is part of this. Right now, with each exhale, you are returning carbon dioxide to the atmosphere that the ocean will eventually absorb. That phytoplankton in the sunlit surface waters will eventually use to build their tiny bodies, that will eventually drift down to the seafloor when those organisms die, adding to the slow accumulation of sediment that is the ocean's memory. You are connected to the ocean's chemistry right now, in this moment, through the simple act of breathing. You have always been connected to it. Every person who has ever lived has been connected to it, has breathed air whose oxygen was partly produced by marine phytoplankton, has drunk water that spent time in the ocean, and before it fell as rain has eaten food that was nourished by nutrients that cycled through the sea. The Megalodon was connected to it too, breathed through it, hunted in it, died in it, died in it, was dissolved back into it. Its molecules are somewhere in the system still, in the water, in the sediment, in the bodies of the organisms that live in the ocean today, passed along the food chain in the way that all matter is passed along. Endlessly recycled, never created or destroyed, only rearranged. Some small part of the Megalodon is in the ocean tonight, and the ocean is connected to your breath. We are all, in the most literal chemical sense, made partly of ancient things, of carbon that has been in the bodies of other organisms before us, of oxygen that has been breathed by creatures whose names we do not know, of water that has cycled through the atmosphere and the ocean, and the land so many times that tracing its history would require a mathematics we do not have. You are ancient, in your atoms if not in your awareness. The stuff you are made of has been here for billions of years. It has been in the sea. It has been in the bodies of creatures that swam in warm Miocene water under a younger sun. You are, in this sense, not separate from the ancient ocean. You are a temporary arrangement of it. Let this thought settle over you like the warmth of a blanket, which it is, a warmth made from the understanding that the boundary between you and the ancient world is more permeable than it appears. You are not looking at deep time from a safe distance. You are inside it. You are one of its expressions, one of the forms it has taken, in its long and patient unfolding, as temporary and as real as the Megalodon was. Temporary and as real as the Megalodon was, as connected to the water and the carbon and the ancient chemistry that underlies everything. As any creature that has ever lived, the ocean outside is breathing in its tea, a Tao rhythm right now. In and out, in and out. The water moving up the shore and then pulling back, up and back, in the twice-daily pulse that the moon's gravity has been drawing out of the ocean for billions of years. The moon that is pulling those tides tonight is the same moon, older, a little further away in its slow recession from the earth, but the same body of rock that pulled the tides when the Megalodon swam beneath them, the same gravitational relationship, the same twice-daily pulse, the same ancient conversation between the ocean and the moon, conducted in the language of water moving up a beach and then retreating. The stars above the ocean tonight are the same stars. Not exactly. The sky changes over millions of years as the galaxy rotates and the stars move in their slow orbits, but largely the same. The constellations that ancient navigators used to cross the Pacific are still there. The stars that no human eye looked up at 23 million years ago, because no human eye existed yet. They were there, burning, and they are still burning now, most of them, their light arriving at the Earth in the continuous stream that has been arriving since before there was an eye on Earth to receive it. The ocean receives this light every night. The surface of the sea and moonlight is one of the most ancient sights available to a human eye. That moving silver, the path of light on dark water, shifting and reforming as the surface moves. Sailors have watched it for as long as there have been sailors. Before that, the animals that lived along the shore watched it with their different eyes and their different understanding. And before that, before there were eyes advanced enough to perceive it as beauty, the light fell on the water anyway, and the water moved in it, and the night passed, and the sun came again. Tonight the ocean is silver and dark. Tonight the deep water below the silver surface is as cold and as still as it has always been. The midnight zone, where no sunlight reaches, lies in its permanent night. The same permanent night it lay in when the Megalodon was alive, populated by the bioluminescent creatures that make their cold light in the dark. The same chemistry of living light that has been happening in the deep ocean for hundreds of millions of years. Down there right now in the darkness below the darkness, small creatures are making their brief blue light and going dark again. The same ancient signal, in the same ancient dark, unobserved and unconcerned with being unobserved. The Megalodon is not there, but the darkness is the same darkness. And something about this is consoling, in the way that only very ancient things can console, not by solving any problem or answering any question, but simply by being so much larger than the problems and the questions that they lose their urgency in comparison. The deep ocean has been dark for 4 billion years. Whatever you are carrying tonight, whatever weight came with you into this room and settled on the pillow beside you, is very, very young by comparison. It is a thing of days or months or years at most, a thing that belongs entirely to the thin, bright layer of the present, and the present, in the context of 4 billion years of ocean darkness, is a very small place, not unimportant. Small things can be important. The Megalodon tooth is small compared to the Megalodon. The Megalodon is small compared to the ocean. The ocean is small compared to the planet. The planet is small compared to the solar system and the solar system is a rounding error in the context of the galaxy. And the galaxy is one of 2 trillion in the observable universe. And yet the tooth matters, the detail matters. The particular, specific, unrepeatable fact of this animal in this ocean, in this period of this planet's history matters, and the particular, specific, unrepeatable fact of you, here tonight, breathing in this room, is no less particular and no less real. You matter the way the tooth matters, not despite your smallness but including it. The smallness is part of what you are. Your breathing is slower now. It has been slowing for a while, without your noticing. The way all the best things happen, gradually and without announcement. The way all the best things happen, gradually and without announcement. The way the tide comes in, and the light changes, and the day becomes evening, and the evening becomes this particular quality of dark and warm, and still that is the antechamber of sleep. Your body knows how to do this. Your body has known how to do this since before you were born, since you were an arrangement of cells in a warm interior ocean of your own, floating in the fluid that all mammalian life still begins in. That echo of the ancient sea, that reminder written in our biology that we came from the water, that the ocean is not entirely outside us, that we carry a version of it with us wherever we go. The Megalodon carried the ocean too, in its blood, in the salt concentration of its body fluids that matched the salt concentration of the sea around it. All ocean life does. The sea is inside them as much as they are inside the sea. This is one of the oldest biological facts, that the internal fluid environment of living cells maintains a chemistry that echoes the chemistry of the ancient ocean in which life first evolved, billions of years ago, before there were eyes or hearts or thoughts or teeth. We are all, in our interior oceans, still swimming in the Cambrian Sea. This thought can carry you now. You do not need to hold on to it analytically. You do not need to understand it or verify it or do anything with it except let it be there in the soft background of your awareness as you drift further waking, and closer to whatever the night has waiting for you. Let it be there like the sound of the actual ocean is there for people who sleep near the shore, not listened to, exactly but present, continuous, a sound that the sleeping mind absorbs without effort, and that works on the body the way all ancient rhythms work, by reminding it of something it has always known. The ocean is breathing. You are breathing. The rhythm is the same, in and out, in and out. The tidal pull and release, the ancient conversation between the water and the moon that has been happening since before there was life to listen to it. And that will continue long after the last listener is gone. You are here for a little while in the middle of all of it. A brief and luminous arrangement of ancient matter lying in a warm room on a turning planet, at the edge of a continuous ocean, at the end of a long day in a short life, in an enormous universe that has been unfolding for longer than the mind can hold. The Megalodon was here too, once. For 20 million years it moved through the same water that is moving tonight, outside your window or across the continent, or wherever the ocean is in relation to where you are, because the ocean is never very far. Not really. The water cycle connects every place on Earth to the sea. The clouds that formed over the ocean and drifted inland and fell as rain, where you live, the rivers that run toward the coast, the water in your body that will return to the ocean eventually in the slow and patient way that all water returns. The giant is gone, the ocean remains. The darkness at its bottom is the same darkness it has always been, patient and cold and full of the slow work of deep time, the accumulation of sediment and the drift of particles, and the quiet chemistry of a world that does not need to be witnessed to be real. You do not need to witness it, Tanai. It does not need you to be awake. It has been doing this for 4 billion years without you, and it will do it now while you sleep. The same tidal breathing, the same deep stillness, the same ancient dark in the places where light has never reached and never will. Let the ocean take this night. Let the deep water hold the hours while you rest. You are small in the best possible way. held by something ancient and continuous and vast beyond your ability to comprehend, cradled in the same water that once cradled giants, rocked by the same slow rhythm that has been rocking the world since before the first living thing opened the first primitive eye and looked out at the sea. The Megalodon is gone. You are here, the ocean is breathing, and you can rest now. You can rest now. The water is warm. The dark is deep. The giants have passed, and the sea holds you, gently, completely, as it has always held everything, as it will hold everything still. Sleep, and so we arrive at the end of our journey together. We began in an ocean that no human eye ever witnessed, warm and wild, and impossibly full of life, stretching to every horizon under a younger sun. We floated through water that existed long before there was anyone to name it, and we felt, in the quiet way that only night allows, what it means to be part of something ancient beyond counting. We held the teeth, those dark and patient fragments, heavier than they have any right to be, each one a letter and a message written across deep time. We learned that knowing something only through its fragments is not a lesser kind of knowing. It is the kind that leaves room for wonder, and wonder is worth protecting. We watched the greatest predator this ocean ever produced move through its world with a patience so complete it bordered on meditation. Not frantic, never frantic, just inevitable. 20 million years of absolute dominance, written in the bones of every creature that shared its sea. We tried to hold its size in our minds and found that trying was its own reward. That reaching towards something too large to fully grasp is one of the most purely human things we do, and one of the most quietly joyful. We sat with its ending, that slow and mysterious disappearance into a cooling world, into shifting currents, and closing gateways, and the rising intelligence of animals that hunted differently. We found that endings without full explanation are not failures of understanding. They are invitations to sit with mystery, and mystery, held gently in the dark, is one of the great comforts this world offers. We explored the myth that refused to die, and we understood why. Not because the Megalodon is still out there, it is not, but because we need the ocean to be larger than our knowledge of it. We need giants in the dark. We need the deep places to be genuinely deep, and they are. They always will be. And finally we drifted home, back to this room, back to this warmth, back to the ancient rhythm of breathing that connects you, right now, to every living thing that has ever drawn breath. In the 4 billion years this planet has been alive, the ocean is still out there tonight. Still, breathing in its tidal rhythm, still dark at its bottom, still holding in its deepest places the teeth of the giant we traveled with tonight. Patient in the sediment, waiting without urgency, as only ancient things can wait. You have done something beautiful tonight. You gave your mind permission to travel far and return slowly. You let the ancient world carry you the way the current carries everything, without effort, without resistance, toward rest. Now let the story settle. Let the ocean hold the night. Let your breath find its own slow rhythm. In and out, the same tide that has moved through every living thing that has ever existed on this water-covered world. The Megalodon swam here once. The ocean remembered it. The ocean will remember you too. In the water in your body, in the breath you are breathing, in the ancient chemistry that connects every living thing to every ocean that has ever been. You are held. You are ancient. You are home. If this journey brought you peace tonight, if the ancient ocean carried you somewhere quieter than where you started, then you are exactly who this channel was made for. While you sleep, new journeys are being prepared. New oceans, new giants, new ancient worlds waiting to carry you gently into rest, exactly the way this one did. Subscribe, so the next journey finds you, like so others who need this kind of quiet can find it too. And leave a comment when you wake. Tell us which part of the deep stayed with you, but that is for the morning. Right now there is only this, the dark, the water, the breath. Sleep well. The ocean is watching over you tonight, and it has been doing this for a very, very long time.